Hello and welcome to Mosaic Connect. I hope you and your loved ones are staying safe and healthy as you shelter in place. April is National Poetry Month. So for this episode, we brought together a mosaic of very talented poets who come from very different cultural backgrounds, lived experience, and poetic styles. And they're going to be sharing with us works that they created during this lockdown. Robert Frost said that poetry is when emotion finds its thought and thought finds the words. So as you listen to the words of these wonderful poets, I hope you will find reflected in them some of your own experiences from these times when life has been interrupted. Before we get started, now is an excellent time. If you'd like to share this event with others, you can share the streaming link or invite your friends to join you in this experience by starting a watch party. So while we do that, I'm going to get started with our poets. We have four wonderful poets: Lisa Rosenberg, Shikha Malaviya, Venus Jones, and PC Muñoz. So starting things off for us will be Shikha.
Thanks so much, Usha, and thanks to Venus and Lisa and PC. It's just fabulous to be back together again, and I'm going to share a poem which is called A Golden Shovel. And a golden shovel is a poetic form which was created by the poet Terence Hayes, in which you use each word of another poem in the line or lines as an end word in your poem while maintaining its order. So, this poem is about COVID-19. When I saw the virus, it somehow reminded me of a centurion's helmet with a red fringe on top. And, as I saw video clips that had poured in from Italy and New York and other places, I thought of all the spots we love to congregate, like, city centers, piazzas with fountains. And so that inspired me to think about how when we were together and, how right now we feel so isolated, but hopefully all of us will, be able to do all the things that we considered normal and that we took for granted. So this poem is called This Little Army, excuse me, A Golden Shovel After the COVID-19 Pandemic, and William Carlos Williams. Neither typhoon nor earthquake, but a centurion so small, it slips through mouth and nose without much fanfare, undetected. How it announces its arrival depends. A cough that breaks the silence, or beads of sweat upon the forehead. This little army that has nary a spine, yet stands so tall and turns the earth red. All ships anchored, still the jet planes wheel, as skies turn bluer and dew weighs the barrow this spring. Locked within our homes, glazed in anxiety, we seek answers, measured with syncopated breaths. What becomes essential? Rain to squelch the drought. Hope, a glass of water half full. We will meet again, I promise, beside the fountain in the park, commiserating over the ones we've lost, as children trawl for quarters, white from wishes of when we were oblivious as chickens. Thanks. And now I'm going to turn it over to the amazing Venus Jones.
All right, well, thank you so much, Shikha, for that. And then I just want to share my poem. The poem that I want to share is called Contaminated Culture. And this is a poem that really, it's somewhat of an ekphrastic poem. It's based off of an image, but I want to just say that I was reflecting on it and I started working on it even more as I sat here reflecting and contemplating during COVID, because I thought of the poem more because of just the title alone, Contaminated Culture. So I began writing this poem before COVID, and it became even more eerie and relevant, I felt, afterwards. And maybe you'll understand why once I start reading it. I was told our culture is contaminated. I was told it's definitely not sterile. I was told it's our job to clean up the mess. Solution: to use alcohol from the barrel. I was told to only work with clean vessels. I was told to be careful around the hood. I was told there's no need for inspection, told our tissue was no damn good. I was told that everything needs to be labeled, told to ignore the sweat and condensation. I was told that yes, there is a lack of balance, but this is beyond PC. I mean, a PH conversation. Not in public, no broadcasting about a system. We're talking about phosphate, buffered saline. Not in public, no broadcasting about a system. This isn't about Bert and Ernie's lab being pristine. I'm guessing we didn't have the right concentrate, but this isn't about reconciliation or a tainted cell. This is a warning for us to investigate the matter. We're lab partners, right? Sometimes I can't tell. And next, I would like to introduce Lisa Rosenberg.
Who's better off unmuted? Okay, thank you, Venus. Thank you, Usha, for deciding to put this together and inviting us. Thank you to my fellow poets. This has been, such an extraordinary time on so many levels. And I know that my family is very privileged to weather it with relative safety here in the Bay Area. And this poem literally started 2 days after we officially went on shelter in place here in the Bay Area counties, and a couple days before the state of California did. And what was so strange then, it was unusually warm, and it was eerily quiet because the traffic suddenly, ebbed to almost nothing. And it was the equinox, and the bird song was just, amplified because of the absence of traffic and the season. So all that really created a space for me to hear some fragments of language and then figure out what they connected to. And so they connected at first to my immediate experience, and then later to a William Carlos Williams poem that was written around the time of the Spanish flu pandemic. So it seemed like worthwhile to make the allusion explicit. Equinox and all. It was Thursday. It was warm. Equal hours of rain and sun to match the parity of night and day. To catch me, half wonder, half anxiety, taking solace in names as crows gathered in the neighbor's cedar, and juncos filled a canopy of oak here. A small backyard in the suburbs, a small parcel equal to any before the stars. A season arrives, defies confinement. We dress for contagion. We quantify calm, then dance in separate rooms. We might rechart the stars, scour the old maps as if their errors were not ours, and scrapping them could right the world. Such vacant streets, only birdsong and cautious distances, and faces of Alyssum rooted beside the fence. That's Equinox and all. And now, in a different groove, PC Muñoz.
Thank you. Thank you, Mosaic, for having us. So great to be with these brilliant women again. The piece I'm going to read is, it's a reflection about the great songwriter Bill Withers, who we lost during this pandemic. And I was thinking about how his songs are like a blueprint for behaving well, for behaving like a good human during a pandemic or even when you're not in a pandemic. It's called How to Get to Heaven and How We've Been Through Hell, a Bill Withers reflection. All that West Virginia funk Mr. Withers left behind in the middle of a pandemic is hollering its wisdom through our speakers and earbuds. And the many lessons in the music are like a balm for America, so sorely in need of healing. As he said, tales of how we get to heaven and how we've been through hell. Like, help out when you can, cherish your elders, mourn your losses, share stories, ask difficult and direct questions, know when you're being used, offer a shoulder in times of trouble, make time just for you and the one you love. The music calls us to lean into our better selves, so we come up out of this thing ready for a worldwide lovely day.
Sorry about that. Fabulous. Thank you all so much. Each one of those poems is just brilliant. And thank you for sharing this. So to kick off the conversation part of this episode, I wanted to throw out there, it occurred to me that pretty much any poem is created from some level of introspection and stillness. So how was your experience creating these poems in this kind of somewhat artificially imposed stillness? Was it different? And if so, how? So I'll just open it up to all of you and let's have a nice lively chat about it. Who wants to go first? Lisa?
I always go first.
Great. Thank you.
For me, it was very literal and very physical that there was more space, because we are thrown back, and it feels like a time warp, into a very human scale. A human scale in terms of distance and time, you know, home-based or close to home, just walking the streets where we live, and the day being slower, especially at the beginning, because not everyone was fully booked with distance connections. And that put me more back in my body, and you know, it awakens the senses, and you're doing these kind of motor tasks that maybe you weren't always doing, or you weren't doing them with as much attention and energy available for listening. And I work very much by ear. So being able to be still, to be doing kind of these very human, very mundane household tasks, and to hear, it's like it opened a whole space to be able to hear not only bits of musical language come to me, but also hear what was swirling, because there was so much confusion, and still is confusion, anxiety, and wonder, really wonder, that half and half, like the half and half of the equinox is still playing out for me, you know, of part of its wonderment, and part of it's this ball of, you know, fear and anxiety and not knowing how things will unfold. But it has definitely put me in a more, I think, workable space as an artist to be on a more human scale in terms of daily life.
It's wonderful. You mentioned hearing the sounds, and one of the things that I hear a lot more of are the birds. You know, just
exactly.
nature seems to be coming back in a way. And, you know, I was in the backyard, and just there's this cacophony of sounds that I don't ever recall hearing before. And thank you, Lisa. Shikha?
Yeah, so interestingly, because of the stillness, you sort of hear the voices in your head more, not in a bad way, but in a good way. But also, because this is something which we are forced to do, the restlessness I experienced amidst the stillness took me me some time to get used to, you know. I wasn't expecting this. I mean, all of us are going through the same experience, and obviously we're coping in different ways, but there was so much restlessness. And usually when something of big proportions occurs, I find I need distance to write about it. But somehow in this situation, I started writing about it. And so I was seeking refuge in poetry. And I think that's what all of us to some extent are doing, is that we're seeking the arts, you know, because everything else we feel like this, lack of control. But at the same time, the stillness has, I think, made us realize what we have, you know, and to celebrate what we have, and to also notice what's happening across the world, and sensing a kind of solidarity, even in the midst of a crisis. The world's become a lot flatter in some ways, you know, and so that stillness has informed me as a writer. It's informed me as a person as well. And people talk about connection, but this sense of connection, of reaching out to others, asking how they are, being in a position to help if we can. This is a very traumatic thing, but it's also a very beautiful thing to see how humans have come together to help one another. So, a little sweet, a little sour.
Well, on that note, since you were talking about just the oneness, I think that's why I chose this background, because the truth is we're coming from home, but this is our home. Earth is our home. And we
Earth Day. So.
Right. So we all share the same home, actually. And I think that what's beautiful about this moment is that I'm hoping that when you look at the people who have been in sheltering in place a lot longer than us, you see them breaking into song. You see them coming together in ways that they have not come together before. So I do believe that there's a blessing in it all, and it could be a greater sense of oneness, a greater, I know this might be pre-recorded, but today is Earth Day, and we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And I remember Neil deGrasse Tyson once saying on a late night talk show that the reason why Earth Day came to in part really was because we started to see ourselves after we landed on the moon. As humans, we saw ourselves in a different way. Mm. And maybe we have lost that way a little bit, but it was then that we started wanting to pay a little bit more attention to our mother and pay a little bit more attention to each other. And of course, I don't always like to rhyme, but I can't help it sometimes. I work really hard to stay in free verse. But anyway, my point is, to go back to your question of stillness, I don't know. I know there was one other poem I wanted to share with you. It's a haiku that I wrote. I don't know if I should share it now or share it later. Should I share it now?
Feel free. Now's a good time.
Okay. Well, it's a poem called Lockdown. Because when you're still, you start. Poets do this anyway. We can't help it. We love words. We start looking at wordplay. We start thinking about all of the different, the denotative, the connotative, the personal meaning of a word. And when I start hearing the news and people saying that I'm in lockdown, we're in lockdown, mm-hmm. I started thinking about that a lot. And I might try my best to make sure that things are affirmative, but here's the haiku that I wrote. When I think of home, I don't think of prison yet. My place is shelter. So when you get still, you have more time to think about meaning and try to find meaning in words. Mm-hmm. And going back to the poem that I already recited, Contaminated Culture, when we think of culture, I could show you the image of this is by Catherine Wagner. I don't know if you can see it. Oh, of course, because I'm not, can you see it now? So This is the image that my poem was based off of. And again, they were talking about a culture in a lab, and on the label on it said 1 times PBS, definitely not sterile, was the only thing I had to go on. And I saw condensation on this bottle. And I thought, culture, well, when we think of culture, we think of different things. But so one of the funniest lines in the poem is when I say solution to use alcohol from the barrel. For marginalized communities, sometimes that's the only medicine they have because they don't have healthcare in our country, unfortunately. And it's kind of a throwaway, but I was also thinking about like right now during COVID, my heart goes out to people who are trying to find other solutions. And I just think that this time is a time for reflection, and this could be a warning for us to get into reflection mode and to go inward, but also to remember what really truly connects us all, and that we all are possibly in the same culture. Because in the beginning of that piece, maybe you think I'm just talking about someone who's not really you're not part of this experiment with me, but you are. And when hopefully what you got out of it is that we're all partners together in staying alive and continuing to protect ourselves in the earth.
Thank you. PC, you're next. Thank you so much, Venus. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
So for me, I think that within the stillness, there was, and I should say there remains an overwhelming sense of historical place. So, it's forced. You are forced to think about where you are in the human continuum and what patterns emerge. What pattern have you become a part of, and that you are actively participating in right now, and what you're doing during that moment. I have a middle school age son, and I'm thinking for probably his whole life, people are going to ask him, what was it like to be a 7th grader in 2020? Mm-hmm. Probably I've been talking to him about it. It's going to be a question he's going to be answering to his kids and grandkids and everybody he encounters for the rest of his life. And for me, that's been kind of the overwhelming sort of foreground. It's very often in the background for artists, I think, to think about those things. But this sort of puts it very much in the foreground. And I think that informs the way I've been creating during this time.
Wonderful. It's great to hear from all of you, your beautiful works of art, the context in which you're creating. And we look forward to having you all back on this program very soon. And we will be sharing information for each of our artists on the post that we, after we conclude the stream. Please do take time to check out their personal web pages and join them on Facebook. They are all wonderful, busy working artists, so you will be able to tap into many other events where they showcase their talent. And we are very proud of them. Every one of them is a Mosaic Fellow. They're part of the Mosaic family. And so thank you very much for joining. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Usha. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Usha. Thank you, Mosaic.